Hey, it's Bryan Stahl, Fidelis Mortgage, the teacher, the student, the entrepreneur. You're going to travel with me of taking my business from my $5 million business to a $10 million business by being introduced some of my mentors, some of the people that are teaching me, some people that have stronger mindsets than I have, and we're really going to dive into it. I have Nate Bailey here. He was a first lieutenant in the Army. Correct, Nate?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
New book coming out, or it's already out, 100 Mile Mindset.
Yeah, coming out really soon. Yeah.
Awesome. And business partner with Satay Magali in Immersion, Man's Wealth, which you might have heard on a different episode. So Nate's part of my huddle, my circle. You know, I have Nate on my cell phone. I really admire a guy if you can get on and go out and run 100 miles and your body doesn't stop. This is no lie, I ran 20 miles a couple days ago. I went home to my wife. She thought I was high. Like, I was speaking something that didn't make sense. I was walking around looking for shit. And she's like, go to bed and eat something. And I have a 33-mile race in a couple weeks. And I said to my friends, I go, wow, that really puts 100 miles into perspective. So I brought Nate onto the show to talk about that mindset, to how you go about doing that, training for that. Because to me, that's like, that looks far away. And I'm only doing 33, and I'm not even doing it straight. It's on 6-mile increments over about 20 hours. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Nate. Appreciate you being on here, and give us a little bit of your history to where you're at now and what makes you tick to do these 100-mile races.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, man. And I get it. I can relate definitely as I've gone through this journey. Like you said, created the 100-mile mindset really over the last 2.5 to 3 years. I don't, really over my lifetime, but really over the last 2.5 to 3 years, really taking on some big physical challenges, but also want challenges that just really show you what you have mentally and emotionally too. Because when you're running or attempting to run 100 miles, I've done a few other extreme endurance events, like 50+ hour events, no sleep, and kind of military style events where you're getting yelled at and screamed at and told to do anything and everything that you can think of under the sun. And really they're just testing you and your mentality to see if you have what it takes to not quit. And I mean, that's absolutely what it takes when you're on your own in the middle of the night, 50 miles into a 100-mile run, no one around you, and it's just you in your head and the dialogue that you got going on. And sometimes the back and forth of you should just quit, what are you doing, to no, I'm going to stick this out and I'm going to keep moving. And especially when you start to hurt and your body hurts, your legs hurt, your feet are all blistered up, and anything that you can think of that could go wrong with your body or that you could put your body through over 100 miles is going to happen. And so I've always, I'm a big believer. Like you said, I'm a coach, I'm a mentor, been a leader in the Army. I was a first lieutenant. And so it's always been important to me to really live what I teach, to not just meet the minimum standard, but to set the standard, to be the standard that others will strive to. And in my mind, and it's true for me, and it's not necessarily true for everyone else, is like, that's part of the reason I go out and do these things, to see what I'm truly capable of, because we are capable of so much more than we really think we are. But also just to really be that standard and to continue to push myself, because I know that I'm leading others, and I'm never going to be the guy that's going to sit there and ask someone to do something that I haven't done, times 10.
Yeah. And you really inspired me. And that's, as a business owner, I think I've told Nate before, and I'm sincere with this too. I decide who my mentors are and my business coaches are off one simple question to myself. If the shit hit the fan, would I follow that person into battle? Would I take an order from them to go right and move fast and do it? And Nate is one of those people that I would follow into battle. Satema is another one that I would follow into battle. They're business partners, and that's why they're on here. I have no financial ties to these guys with anything that they're doing. I'm literally, again, just remember what this show is about. It's about going on the journey with me of the people that have touched me, the people that I work with, the people that I'm learning from, and at the end of the day, it's all about who's in your circle. So that's why, it was so humbling. I think I told you I was on my second lesson of jiu-jitsu, and the first one, Helson Gracie was there, which he's probably in his 60s, and the owner of the gym, Mike, says, all right, puts me in a position. He goes, get up. I was like, I'm a grown man. He can't hold me down. He held me down like I was, a little kid. And I'm doing these things for the exact same reason. As a leader or anything, 100 miles, you started getting my mind thinking, what if your car breaks down and your family's with you and you have to go 60 miles to save them? Can you do it? And I have 2 kids and a wife now, and I said, I can't.
Yeah, that's a great question, because you ask that question and people want to say that, of course, like if my kid's life was on the line, of course I could. But the reality is like we all have a certain capacity, right? Like there's only so much. Yeah, the human mind and body can really go further than you think it can. But if you had to run 60 miles and you have neglected your body for years and years and you're overweight or you're just out of shape, like the reality is you can't.
Yeah.
People will want to tell themselves that they can, but they can't, but you can't. So I love that you're going out and you just like the realization, man, how can I prepare my body in case something like that does happen?
Yeah, it's true. We don't think about those worst case scenarios, but as a leader, you need to be prepared to jump into things like that and make sure you're prepared. So, I wanted to kind of like maybe fast forward a little bit to talk about Immersion, Man Wealth. When I was in it, I'm not going to give you all the details. Our group said that Nate didn't have a soul, and it was usually during the physical parts, and it may look easy, but at the end of the day, some of that stuff was not, and it tested a lot of people. So what made you start Immersion, Man Wealth? Because you were in the insurance business before, correct?
Yeah. So I was in the insurance business for a little over 14 years, and I've owned a CrossFit gym in between there, like during the same time, and multiple businesses, real estate, things like that. But I've always had this draw to be a leader, to be a coach, a mentor, to want to speak and impact, to spread my message. Again, I got the book coming out. That's my 3rd book, and so I just have always felt called to do that. Even as a kid in high school sports, right? Just always was a captain, was leading others and guiding the younger kids, and then into the Army. Obviously, I wanted to be an officer. I wanted to lead. I wanted to be in the front, impacting and guiding others as well. And so I've always just seen myself gravitating towards that, and so that's, the opportunity came up. I met Satema a little over 4 years ago, and just kind of one thing led to another. It's a weird path. It's one that I don't know that you can necessarily try to create intentionally if you wanted to, but it's just something that kind of happens over time. And all the experiences that I had leading up to that, I think just really were there to prepare me for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually went to Immersion, my wife and I. So we have some experiences on it, and we touched on some of this stuff with Satema as well, of like how the 4 quadrants, and if you're so imbalanced in one, and some of the principles. And I picked out some of the principles, for your 100-mile mindset. One that comes to mind for me is principle number 5. Commitment alters everything. When people come to me, like even whether it's people that want a job or whatever, and they say, well, how do I create a business plan that gets me from here to here? Like, how am I going to go from 5 million to 10? How would you explain that principle to people that kind of covers a vast part of their life?
Yeah, well, commitment alters everything. It's just commitment. We really look at as this 3-tier definition of do what you say you're going to do what's required, and act decisively in spite of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and moods. And so, inside the 100-mile mindset that I've developed, I didn't complete 100 miles until my third attempt. So not only do you need to do what's required, but a big piece of doing what you said you would. There was a time in my life when I would say that I was going to do something. I'd maybe even attempt to do it, and I would fail, or I would fall short, or I would quit before it happened. And then I would just move on to something else. And for too long, when you live that way, when that becomes a part of who you are, it's a very dangerous place to be, right? So I could have very easily quit after the first attempt when I covered 64 miles and got cut off the course. Like, a lot of people did tell me, hey, that's a great job. Like, it's amazing. And it is an accomplishment, but it wasn't 100 miles. And so then I signed up a month and a half later for my second attempt, and I finished 75.6 miles. And again, further than I'd ever gone. It's pretty respectable. It's a long ass ways to run. But it wasn't 100. And so, like, I just wasn't going to quit. I was committed to the result. I was committed to doing what I said I would, because there's so much power in being your word, and too many people are casual with their word. Yeah. And like I said, even that was me for a while and for a time in my life. And I'm just, that's not okay. I want to be the person that when I say I'm going to do something, people can count on me doing it.
I actually watched, I believe this was the time you're talking about. I watched a video where you probably came into an area and a gentleman said to you, you got to stop. It's too late, or the cutoff. And there was about a 15-second period where you were just looking at him, and I could tell you wanted to say something, and then you turned away and you looked back at him again. And I was wondering, I was like, I wonder what he wants to say right now in these 15 seconds after running all those miles, and they told you gotta cut it off. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Probably can't say, though, what you wanted to say.
No, I don't know. I mean, it was, I felt like I was feeling great and felt like I could continue, and was definitely disappointed. But at the same time, it's probably more disappointed in myself, and realizing that could have been easily avoided. We missed the cutoff, and we missed it by like less than 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
We could have easily hit it, but we just, again, so that big lesson, right? Details matter. And I wasn't prepared when it came to knowing what that cutoff was. We made some assumptions that we were good if we stayed at a certain pace, and that wasn't the case. And so it was just kind of everything hitting you at once, that, man, this isn't going to happen. And yeah, there's all kinds of thoughts, right? I told people I was going to do this, and now now I got to face the music and like admit what happened and explain what happened and be a little bit embarrassed and all those emotions kind of at one time. Yeah.
And I think the audience need to realize, with the book you wrote, The 100-Mile Mindset, and you're not just talking about physical right now, because that 100-mile mindset translates into everything. So, like, if you're listening to this in the audience and you think of, well, let's just say you went 60 some miles and you had to cut it off. Then you went 70 some. Think of the mindset for you to say, I'm going to do this again, because I know what my internal voice says to me at mile 20. And there's a lot of F words going back and forth, a lot of saying just quit. My feet hurt after 20. So my mindset right now, like, I don't have a 100-mile mindset at this point. And I need to get one. So that really turns into kind of everything. And it brings me to like principle number 8, which is the purpose of existence is eternal expansion and value creation. And I think that has to do with your book too. And I think it has to do with everything in life. So you're much better at teaching and explaining that. So tell the audience of what that means to you.
Yeah, and I definitely cover this in the book as well, in the 100-mile mindset. But the purpose of existence is eternal expansion. What's eternal expansion? Forever. Like, we're constantly growing, and if you're not growing, you don't just sit in one place. You're regressing, right? The Navy SEALs, they talk all the time about you will always revert back to your lowest level of training, and so they are constantly working on the basics, on the fundamentals. They're drilling, they're going through different drills. They're always working it's not just like, all right, we're waiting for our next mission, so we're going to just sit in our bunks and hang out and maybe, do some bicep curls. No, they're training. They're always getting ready for the next mission, even if they don't know what that is. There's skills, there's fundamentals, there's basics inside of being a Navy SEAL, and they know that when the bullets start flying, when lives are literally on the line, that they will revert back to their lowest level of training than that high stress environment. So they're making damn sure that their lowest level is way higher than anyone else's. And so they're continually growing and trying to improve. Same thing for us. If that's, I'm always trying to get a little bit better. I'm always trying to push my capacity or my threshold, increase it, because I know if I try to sit still and get comfortable, I'm really just going to regress back to who I was before. And, it's kind of like, if you don't water your garden, all the plants are going to wilt and die. And so that's what it's all about. And then just creating value for others, as far as the more you focus on others and putting more out, the more you will really receive. And that's not necessarily the intention to get that back, but it's a byproduct. To continue to create more value, more will ultimately come back to you as well. And when you're growing, you can't help but, share what you've learned or what you've experienced, because it will help others. And who doesn't want to help others? So, yeah.
And I agree. And like I agree with you, it's not something that you do on purpose to manipulate something. It just happens. And an example of this is, I remember one time I was on a board of a charity locally here, and I would donate money and do what I had to do. And I never once thought of anything, but I looked back after a year, kind of looked at where business came from, and I said, oh my gosh, like 5% of my business came from people that were involved with this. I didn't even ask them. I didn't even make a request because I didn't feel it was appropriate, but it just came. And so principle 8, I think, is one of the most important ones, because whether it's physical, you teach this in Immersion: physical, relational, spiritual, financial. If you're constantly not moving, and Satema and I were talking about, I was at dinner with a guy and sold over $1 billion worth of products, worked 15 hours, and I had just got done reading through this again multiple times. I didn't want to say anything, but I was scratching my head going, I wonder if he's happy, because he was 80 pounds overweight and worked all those hours. I just said, I didn't want to ask him because it wasn't in my business, but I start looking at that and I say to myself, sometimes I'll be out of balance and I work too much, worry about these bills, and then you start to see things kind of flutter on either the end of business or relationships or even financial. What would you tell the audience when you talk about financial, spiritual, relational, and physical? Like, how do you keep that balance from getting out of whack all the time?
Yeah, that's great. And it's you have to be really intentional, right? That possibly that's part of the reason that it took me 3 attempts to finish 100 miles, right? I didn't give myself a lot of time. I decided in March, basically coming off the couch, that I was going to run 100 miles in June. So, right, I didn't give myself a lot of time to prepare. But also, if you think about what would it take to run 100 miles, you would think that it would probably take a lot of time, right? Well, if I'm going to put 3-4 hours of training a day physically into accomplishing this 100-mile goal, I have to sacrifice in other areas, which means my family is probably going to get less of me. My business is going to get less attention because there's only so many hours in the day. And that's not okay with me, because I in the big scheme of things, I go out and run 100 miles. Okay, that's cool, but most people don't really care, right? And it's awesome. My family doesn't really care either. They're like, that's cool that you did that, but whatever, we'd rather have you home, as a father and husband. And so at the end of the day, I just try to keep a great perspective of what's truly important for me. And for me, having a great family is a big part of that. So I'm not going to sacrifice 3 or 4 hours a day. I might do that once a week on the weekends, and I might get up really early before everybody else does, so that I'm not taken away from them. But I'm gonna train, and when I train, I'm gonna give everything I got, and I'm gonna try and get the most out of each time that I'm out and running. but I'm also not going to spend, more than an hour or two a day in that area. And so I try to keep that balance by really keeping my priorities in check and what's important, and being really intentional. You have to be intentional. You have to plan out your day. You have to have the system that you live by, which obviously through Man Wealth Immersion, we have a way that we live, a system that we live by every single day, every week, and which helps us to stay focused on all 4 areas.
Yeah. And I'm telling you guys, it's probably hard to translate from me to you of how great their systems are and how great their immersion is. Remember why I'm bringing these people on. I forget who said this, in different instances, when you're taking advice from someone, let's just say it's buying a house for argument's sake. Are you going to take advice from your friend at church who's bought one house in their life, and the people that they connect with, maybe they just like them, and that's just the reason they use them? Or are you going to take advice from somebody that has made a ton of mistakes, has gone through a lot of different challenges, and then has gotten to certain places in life and business? And that's why I'm introducing the people that are in my huddle, because I'm 45 years old. I just started realizing who you surround yourself with, of how important it is, and not just a couple years ago, probably at 42.
Yeah.
Before, I was just flying by the seat of my pants. I was hustling, I was working, and when I start connecting to you guys, like you and I we really connect, I think, because the military minds, like we just get it.
Yeah.
It was
Absolutely
a funny story at the immersion. Part of it, hopefully I won't tell too much, but
yeah, no, you're good.
we have to roll around in sand after getting in the water multiple times, and I was the platoon leader at that point. And there was one guy, he had this shirt on with this material that none of the sand stuck to it. And Nate asked me a simple question. He's like, "Do you see anybody here that's not fully sandy?" And I said no. And we're both looking at a guy that half of his shirt wasn't sand, but I knew the material, it didn't stick to it, but I know it's a yes or no question. And we had to get back into the water. And it was funny, but in that instance, my mind knew what the right answer is, but I
Yeah, right.
while you're looking at the same thing at me, I lied because I didn't want to get back in the water. And it's interesting when you look back on it, I say to myself, why did I do that? Why did I just say, yeah, right there, like none of his shirt has sand on it? But I think after that, you realize that his material didn't hold the sand.
Yeah, well, that, or I'm sure I knew that the material didn't hold the sand, but I also wanted to see what you would say. Because you knew too.
Mentally, it was the 100-mile mindset said, hopefully he doesn't see this and we don't.
Yeah, hopefully he doesn't see it, or maybe he understands and he won't let us, he won't have us go back in the water.
Yeah,
and
that was fun. Everybody got a laugh of it after the fact. I want to talk about one last principle with you, and it's kind of like probably a shift from your 100-mile mindset book, and it's more business. And I really I'd say 5 months ago, I really got pissed off at a guy because I just made him money, and then he turned around and asked me for something after I did. And it's principle number 6. Ask and you shall receive, like making requests.
Yeah.
And when someone comes with a business plan, like talk about how simple this is, but yet how nobody does it and the reason why they don't do it. Principle number 6.
Yeah, I think the reason that most people are afraid to ask is just because of these preconceived thoughts or stories that they have about what the answer is going to be, right? They're jumping to what the person's going to say and not even allowing them the opportunity to actually answer the question for themselves, right? So there's these thoughts or these stories that you have or these beliefs that you're believing to be true about what they're going to say or how they're going to react if you ask a question. And I'll go back to when I did this event, SEAL Fit Kokoro, which this really cemented this principle for me in a different way, right? Because it was Navy SEALs lead these civilians through this event. It was 52 hours, no sleep, just crushed us. And 28 of us showed up, 9 of us actually finished. Well, right after we finished, literally seconds after we finished, one of the 9 fell to the ground and died. Like,
Wow.
really, really crazy. And, young guy, it was actually his wedding anniversary that day. Had 2 little kids, 3 and 1 at the time. This was back in 2016. And so for me, just that experience and being able to take something positive from that is to just realize that how short life really is, and to make bigger requests, to ask the question when it happens, because most people are unwilling for whatever reason. And again, I think that goes back to just, they're afraid of what someone's going to say, or they already have this idea of what they're going to say. And 99 times out of 100, that's not at all what that person is thinking or how they would actually react, right? So we're projecting what we think they're going to say onto them and not even giving them the opportunity. And now for me, having that experience, like, hopefully you don't have to ever experience that, but I know, some people have experienced someone dying or someone going too soon. This guy was 32, the best shape of his life. And just made me realize right then and there, like, man, what a lesson. Like, make the requests, ask anytime you have the question, like, ask for the upgrade, ask to sit over here in the restaurant, ask for the referral, ask for the business, make the phone call. Don't think about it. The moment you allow your mind to think about it, really what your mind's doing is telling you why you shouldn't ask or make the request. If you have the thought, act on it, and don't think. Ask and receive. What's the worst that can happen? They say no. Like, you're not going to die. You're going to be all right. And then just keep asking. Yeah, why would we not?
Exactly. And when I look back on this gentleman that I helped grow his business a little bit, and then a couple weeks later, he asked me for a donation, I got pissed at him, and I let it come out to him. I said, come on, man. I said, no. Then I circled back, and I'm thinking, this guy just had the guts to ask me. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
So in on both ways, have the guts to ask someone, but if someone asks you something, just be mature and powerful enough, if you don't want to do it, just to clearly say, no, thank you. And you don't got to give an expansive reason of why you don't or can't do something. It's just a simple no. And these are the kind of things that Nate and at Immersion teach you to get out of your own head and stop making up stories with things and respect. So, like, here's my business plan for when I bring in new people. I'll say to them, like, already get a notepad. I want you to listen intently. And they're curled over. They're like, all right. They think, I'm like, this is going to be brilliant. I have the best business plan for you in your entire life. It's going to make you a lot of money. Are you ready for it? And they're like, yeah. I go, just ask.
Yeah.
And they sit there and I say, let that sink in. And they're like, that's it? I said, yeah. How many times a day do you just ask? I bet you almost never. They want to do things that are like, they put blinders on and they're walking like let's do this seminar, which is good to add value, but you're kind of like asking with like your back turned instead of just going do the seminar and then afterwards go ask. So
what do most people do in business, right? Business owners, they don't want to ask. They don't want to have the conversation. So what do? They're like, I just need the funnel. I just need the leads. I just need this magic thing that's going to, once I have all those leads flowing in, that I'll be fine, because they don't want to actually just go and ask. They don't want to go talk to people, have conversations, and personally ask. They want to find some other way around having conversations, again, because it goes back to this fear of rejection, or this fear that, because someone says, like you said, don't be afraid to say no. If someone asks you, that's your right to do that. And so people are afraid of that. They take that as a rejection, a personal rejection of themselves, right?
Yeah. I wonder how much they're really costing themselves. Like, my wife has taught me something, because when we go out to restaurants, sometimes she'll ask for like a bunch of things and I'll be like, oh God. I'm like, oh man. I'm paying for this. So I'm like, I don't want to ask for ketchup because I just asked for 2 other things and I'm paying for this. And she's looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're here to eat, just ask. Yeah. And it's amazing. But that little principle, if you just asked all day in a cool way, you don't want to be like when someone sees you walk into a room, everybody runs because they know you're about ready to try and dive into their pocket. But there's a good way to do it. So I want to kind of wrap this up, and I want everybody to know here. So I went to the immersion, and I listened to my inner voice at that immersion. Remember how I told you in another episode how I didn't listen to my inner voice, and I hired all those people, and it cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars? I wrote these guys a $25,000 check in once because I was all in. I'm fully committed. These principles, living this way is, and you might be saying as you're listening to this, well, I know that stuff. Yeah, I said the same thing, but you didn't practice. I didn't practice any of it, and almost no one that I know that doesn't have a plan doesn't practice it. So again, there's no connections here financially. I'm just simply saying, watch me of where this stuff gets me. I wouldn't wait too long, because if you wait too long, you'll have wasted a lot of time, and you'll see the results at the end of the day. So how can people connect with you? When's your book coming out? Where can they look for it? Once you get it out here, we'll put a tag here how to get it. But how can they get a hold of you if they want to talk about immersion, if they want to talk about coaching, mindset?
Yeah, they can. You could of course you could connect with me on Facebook or Instagram, but also my website, NateBaileySpeaks.com. Is a great place to get a hold of me. My podcast, you've been on my Championship Leadership podcast, my blog, the different events that we have. We have an events page for our Man Wealth and Shield Maiden immersion programs on there as well, so they can get more information there. If you want to check out Man Wealth or Shield Maiden, you could go to shieldmaidenlive.com or manwealth.com, I believe is the other one. But yeah, NateBaileySpeaks.com is probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Cool. And I shouldn't even be telling my competitors about this. Like, I shouldn't. Like, this is the stuff that's going to take a leader, to the next level. Emotional intelligence. That you could almost say emotional intelligence and have all these other things that we're talking about below of what it will get you at the end of the day. And what I love about Nate too, he's a silent leader, meaning he doesn't have to say shit, and just has that magnetic drawing to you. That's why I said, after watching you and then being part of this, and you and I talking every week, and how your mind works and how you handle things, it's great. So we're going to end this here. I appreciate you, Nate. I appreciate you being on here, and we'll see you around.